Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Warriors, sellswords, and maesters, welcome to episode 116 of The Rewind. This podcast is your weekly raven for all things Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, and the peoples of the realm that are looking for the next MMO to sit upon the Silicon Throne. This week, we're forecasting future community concerns. We're having a tourney to decide if quests should give XP, and we're learning about lycanthropes. So, call your banners, abandon your hearths, and prepare to march towards launch as we take on the long night of game development. So join me, Theric, and first of his name, King of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, Desrin, for this week's Rewind. How'd you like that, Des? I mean, is that themed enough for you? I know we're doing a contest, or we're sort of competing with each other for theming here. How's that?
Okay, yeah, that really put me over the edge, man. Putting that on my list of our introductions, it supersedes everything. That is epic.
Yeah. You got 3 titles, and if I'd really been feeling it, I should have done the whole list, because in case people are listening and don't know, this is a complete Game of Thrones reference, because House of the Dragon premiered last week, and I've just been gorging on Game of Thrones content all week, going back, listening to old stuff, new podcasts about House of the Dragon. And if I'd said the whole spiel, your title would have been 15 minutes long, but I didn't do that.
Well, thanks for everyone.
Now, I know thanks on behalf of everyone. I know you're a fan of Game of Thrones, Des. We talked about this on Thursday a little bit. Have you had a chance to watch House of the Dragon yet, the new episode?
Not yet. So,
no? Okay.
So leave me out of of any potential spoilers, I guess. I am the type to wait until the whole season's done before I watch.
Really? Oh, so you're not going to watch it episodically? You're not going to do it every week?
No, it's too much of a emotional drain.
Really? Wow.
Because I'll watch an episode and then I'll be so anticipatory. I am really into it for a few days, then I'll forget about it, and then the next week I will not remember. And really? So I have to kind of watch it all at once to some degree to retain everything.
See, I'm on the other end of the spectrum right now, because I have Sundays for me right now, especially coming up in the next couple of weeks, have become the best day of the week. We got the Rewind premiere on 11 o'clock my time on Sundays. And then I've got football at noon usually. And I think a lot of Bears games are at noon this year. And then House of the Dragon on Sunday nights, man. I love my Sundays. They're the best day of the week. And it's such a nice way to cruise into the next week. I mean, anyway, I'm loving it. So things are looking good. But you know what else makes Sunday the best day of the week? It's our adventuring party, because they're with us every week for our weekly adventures. And this week, it's as usual, we've got Ziplocks on the Darkmer Rogue, Sparoh on the Elf Ranger, Bounty Code on the Human Wizard, Screech on the Scar Bard, Wikiboo on the Human Enchanter, Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric, Horsaceros on the Human Warrior, Fury Wrath on the Archai Summoner, Pavejo on the Gnome Wizard, Acera Avienda on the Elf Druid, and Churro Dude on the Halfling Dire Lord. So if you want to hear your name on that list, you can head over to our Patreon page. It's linked in the description. And if you see something that you might be interested in, then you can join there. But as you can see from the graphic on the screen, which I also want to thank Sparoh for helping us out with each and every week. She does a great job with it. The adventure party also includes anyone who wants to drop a super chat during the premiere or super thanks in the comments, which we got one this week. So if that's your preference, make sure to give us your future Pantheon race and class so we can add you to the graphic and the banner, which you're going to see during the show coming up. It's always appreciated, of course, never expected though. And we want to put all that support into growing the Pantheon community through pledge giveaways and other events. And on that note, we'd like to announce next week's episode, we're going to be doing another round of giveaways. And stay tuned to our social media throughout the upcoming week for more details on that, because it's going to be big. I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah.
Desert, we've talked about this a little bit. We haven't fully decided how we're going to do it.
It's been a long time coming. Yeah, keep your eyes peeled, guys.
Yeah, so it's going to be epic. So stay tuned for next week, and then we'll go from there. But that was a nicely themed introduction, Desrin. Shall we begin the Dance of the Dragon?
Dracarys.
This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. I'm so glad you used my little notes there. That is awesome. I appreciate you taking my my cue there. But
I should have been a little more intense, honestly. I was just so surprised to see it in the notes. But it was great. It's great.
I put it in there for myself, if nothing else. But you really ran with it there, so I appreciate that. Let's get to the news and notes for the week. Now, this is one of the weeks where we don't have any real major news pieces released by Visionary Realms. So, this segment's going to be a little news light. I do want to remind everybody that next week, we're going to learn if the September pre-alpha test is going ahead on September 17th, as has been indicated by Visionary Realms. So that's exciting for next week. So, in the absence of like a news piece to review, Desrin, I thought this might be a good opportunity for you and I to, do a bit of a debrief on some things we don't usually delve into too much on this show. And, one of those being concerns or fears when it comes to Pantheon as it gains momentum, as it attracts more attention. And we're seeing that it's getting closer and closer and further along in the development process. And there's more attention being paid to it. We're going to talk about that later in the show too. So this is not necessarily from a developmental standpoint, although that plays into it. I'm talking about more from the standpoint of like community health. What does that mean? And it actually does link back to the August newsletter when Ben Dean did an interview talking about the challenges of marketing a long development cycle crowdfunded game, which Pantheon is. In that newsletter, the title was Showcasing Pantheon: Rise of the Fallen. And one of the main takeaways was how the media landscape is so different right now than it once was. There's multiple times in the article where Ben mentions the significance of things like independent video content. And I've pulled a couple quotes from it from the newsletter, because I want to really hit this point home. Here's the first quote where he's talking about it. He says, when Visionary Realms was formed, the marketing landscape was going through huge changes too. It's mapped out more now, but going back 10 or 15 years when I was working on other projects, this is Ben Dean talking, he says video game content was just plainly different. Traditional marketing at the time was largely focused on banner ads, written articles, and trade shows. Fast forward to today, and the standards aren't the same. Banner ads are being dropped in favor of social media ads. Written articles are for fewer, replaced by independent video content, and even trade shows that were attended by fewer and fewer studios who are now opting instead to communicate directly through social media or their own in-person virtual events. So the key there, like I said, independent video content plays a big role in the marketing of Pantheon, right?
Yeah, and just in case people aren't aware, that coming from Ben Dean used to work for MMORPG. So
I thought it was 10 Ton Hammer.
Sorry, my bad. But yes, another MMO, publication house. So sorry, I should have had that in the notes, because I knew I would space it. But yeah, he has professional experience in this realm exactly relating to this. So just in case people didn't know.
Yeah, that's a great bring up, man. I totally should have put that in here, but yeah, you're right. And 10 Ton Hammer was big back in the day. I mean, I don't really know if they're still a thing, but I know back in the EverQuest days, they were a huge outlet. Even, pushing further into the more recent history, they were still a huge outlet. And then there's another point in the article where Ben talks about the importance of earned and owned media. And I want to explain what he means by that, by the quote he uses. He says, the question is, does the involvement of investors or potential investors change how they market Pantheon? And his response is yes, but only in how much we market. We don't spend a lot of money on marketing currently because it's more important for us to invest more in the development of the game now than marketing it. When new investors come in, sometimes we might earmark some of that for marketing purposes. But apart from that, we try to focus on earned and owned media rather than paid media. And then a final comment along the same lines, speaking about third-party content, he says, quote, right now we're focused on two stages of communication, awareness and consideration. We're reaching out to larger audience through streams and third-party content. We're working to improve our streamlining of game information through our own content, like the website, newsletter, and video archive. So those are three quotes that basically are saying the same thing, talking about the importance of the social media landscape to Pantheon as an entity, right?
A lot on video too.
Yes, a lot on video. And, again, this is what this is what sort of inspired me to have this discussion this week, is that, that's a developer's perspective, but I want to tackle that from a community perspective. What does that mean for content creators? What does that mean for us who are trying to, cover this game? And not cover as in we're not journalists. I always make that distinction. I don't consider myself a journalist, and I think that's important. And everybody who's listening to this, everybody knows our general mindset when it comes to this project. I mean, we don't make any bones about it. We believe in VR. We believe in what they're trying to do. We have our critiques. We do that. We voice them. But our philosophy has been, shown that we believe it's a worthy project, and we believe that they've earned our trust. So, as you hear at the end of the show, we're a fan community. We're not affiliated with VR in any way, and that hasn't changed. But what has changed, and it's going to continue to change, is the volume of the commentary that's out there. I think, heck, every week, Desiree, you highlight these community spotlight segment where we see more and more and more people creating content for Pantheon, right? and I think we can all agree, with the co-stream looming, we're in for like a tidal wave of content, of commentary coming. I mean, this is going to get pretty big.
It's going to get a lot of eyes. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And that means a lot of discussion. So, with that in mind, and with what Ben talked about, I think it's an important conversation to have when it comes to the role and the responsibilities of anyone who wants to create content around this game. So let's have that conversation, Des, and I'll kick things off because, as I've alluded to, one of my number one fears, one of my main fears about this, in this area is producing content that's, taking the time to be well-informed and to be, bringing knowledge and bringing information that's accurate and correct to the landscape. I think a lot of times we've seen, and I think everyone who's listening, and if you can think of a game or you've had that experience where, the community around a game got sort of derailed or sidetracked because there was misinformation put out there, or there was something that, the narrative sort of got made into something based on something that wasn't accurate, right?
Just or misinterpreted, and that just, one big content creator or something that hears something one way that's not how it's intended, that can spiral out because, nowadays we have content creators that make content based on other content creators. And so, it's a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. Just before we started recording, I actually was watching, I was looking at YouTube or whatever, and I saw a couple of ones that are like reacting to, and they were all like somebody reacting to a content creator, to another content creator, to the actual source. Like you see this like trickle down effect of media, and it's like the whisper game, right? It's like it just gets changed a little bit every time it gets to the next source, and that's just the way it goes. And what I'm trying to sort of get across here, I think, is that it really becomes a big responsibility to try and maintain the sanctity of the information, maintain the accuracy of the information, and being detail oriented is so important in making content surrounding, whether it's either, we're talking about gaming here, but in any real topic you're covering, whatever it is, and this is one of the things about you, Desmond, that I love so much, is that you're so detail oriented when it comes to things like, when I was talking last week about something about Path of Exile, and I was talking out of my ass because I just didn't, and you corrected it, and you're like, but it's not about like, I didn't get angry at that. I took it on the chin and said, yeah, I totally did. I totally didn't know what I was talking about. And I think that's really important to have that humility in making content. And, like I said, with VR, relying on this kind of content, that's what really becomes important. It's not about not being critical. I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I'm saying here. I'm talking about being accurate.
Yeah.
So, facts are what the bottom line is when it comes to this.
Yeah. On that note, actually, since you spoke about how Ben's starting to try to approach this with their release of content, their official content, right? It kind of, like you said, they're leaning on content creators and third-party folks to distribute that. But it sounds like they're really focused on making sure that their content, their official stuff, while it might not be plentiful, that it is informative enough for people to make content. And that's a very different approach, but I do see them starting to lean into that. And as long as the base information is clear, it does help that trickle down effect and makes it easier to source your material, when it's not obfuscated all over the place. We have a newsletter, we have a dev stream, we have a DRT. If content creators, can't dig into those, very few sources to get their information, it's not, they try to make it as simple as possible, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, we're being given more information, and that's something that Ben talked about in the newsletter as well, is how their development process has been so transparent, and that really is their currency. Transparency is their currency. They know it, and we know it, right? This was something that comes up fairly regularly, and it came up not that long ago. And I saw a quote somewhere, somebody said, they recognize that being transparent about their development process is the most important thing. They know it. They're giving us the tools to make good content with. We have a responsibility to utilize those tools. And, of course, there's room for interpretation. There always is. You don't have to, I'm not talking about just read it verbatim. That's not it. It's more like just use the information that's available to you to be as accurate as you can possibly be. Yeah. I take that very seriously, and I know that you do too. And that's the thing. And, there's going to be there's going to be so many different sources of information. And as consumers of that, I mean, I'm thinking about myself here when I'm looking for content on other games, like if I'm playing Elden Ring and, I want to know this, that, and the other, I look to find out who the most reputable source is,
I was about to ask if it makes you ever second guess if you're, watching something that, has a bunch of views and, but if it's something you're unfamiliar with, you're a little bit at their mercy, right? Of making sure that, this seems like the place everyone goes to for information, but who knows? If you're unfamiliar with the community, you're unfamiliar with the game, you're really kind of putting yourself out there until you start digging in, either to their source material or you're just validating by their community that they are truthful and accurate.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually, because I think the default for a lot of people is just to look at the numbers, look at how big the channel is, or if it's, if they're on Twitter, if it's look at their number of followers they have and all that kind of stuff, and all these metrics that we use for social media. But, I think it's important that the way I look at it is to show your work, right? When you're putting material together, when you're doing content about something, show your sources, put your sources in the comments, in the description, right? Or in the show notes. This is something that, again, you do so well in our show notes for this show. All the things we referenced, the whole show, are listed in the show notes. And this is something that takes a little more effort, obviously, for somebody to look at, to dig and get. But I think it's really important because it tells you, this isn't just, not just spitballing here. I'm not just making, assumptions or doing something that isn't based in fact. So, yeah. So, I mean, misinformation is number one. Now, I'll give you my second one and then I'll ask you for yours, Des. But the second one is misdirection. And what I mean by that is, yeah, and we've seen this a few times, but basically responding too heavily to public outcry on a gameplay issue, and it's sometimes it's called like the bandwagoning effect, where people read a headline and then all of a sudden it's piling on a little bit. How much is VR going to respond to that? And this isn't an issue right now because we're in a different phase of development. This is more down the road, I would say, when when the game is, they're doing patches and they're
when
doing
it's public
balancing,
too. That's the other thing. When it's publicly playable, that this is going to come in a lot. But it's so funny that you mentioned that because I just sent you a message before we started recording because I went to share, spoiler for later in the episode, an article with Pantheon in it, and I went to share it on Twitter, and it actually asked me hey, are you sure you want to share this? Because you didn't actually read it. Given I
really, yeah, I didn't know Twitter did that. Wow,
it's the first time I've had it happen. But for the record, I did read the article just separately from a link from Discord. But the browser doesn't know that, so. that was a really interesting thing, but that kind of just kind of sharing a headline, that's kind of what you mentioned there. That in itself can be a bit of misdirection, and really, bandwagon, snowball, whatever term you want to use.
Yeah, great example, man. I had no idea that Twitter even did that, and I'm actually glad to hear that Twitter does that now. That's kind of a new, seems like a good idea. Because I mean, headlines are seductive and misleading sometimes, and everybody knows clickbait is what it is, and they want those clicks, and you put headlines in certain ways to get those clicks. But we have to read articles, and we have to make sure that the loud voices don't necessarily drown out the calm ones necessarily. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Like people have loud voices and they are passionate about what they believe, and that's great. But the calm voices are sometimes the ones that have more of a nuanced approach and just aren't as bold with their take on something. And I count myself as one of those people, and I'm sure others, are on the other side. I know, Minus was much more of a louder voice than I am. But we also had we would always come to an accord when we could discuss something and work out, if there was something we disagreed on. You and I are more aligned in terms of our disposition, maybe.
I can't say how many times we've been asked for a Minus rant or something as well.
That's true.
It's like, this is our version of a Minus rant, I think. It
really is.
So, you get what you get, guys. We try to be impassioned in some way, but if anything I'm going to be passionate about, though, it's probably this subject, I'll admit, because
exactly. Yeah. So, it's just a matter of when we get to the point of the game being in a launched state, and there's an issue with gameplay, will the headline bandwagoning, the snowball effect be, how will VR respond to that? I guess we'll wait and see. So, yeah, those are my two things, and I thought those were sort of related to what the article talked about. But Desrin, what evokes your fears?
Oh man. Fears is kind of a strong word, of course, but making me think about this, I do have a few things that I'm kind of like expecting, but hoping that they don't, cause negativity, right? Because, one thing that is just bound to happen. So like, I'm going to throw this out there, just because it's going to come, guys. But, we're going to get hit pieces about development, which, we already do get a little bit. There's probably going to be scandals from ex-employees. There's probably going to be, some kind of defamation. Like that stuff is just, it's going to happen. Pantheon has had a pretty rocky development, right? And we all know this, to some degree. And what really is important in the end is that we come out of it and the company is solid, etc. But, because of its past, there's going to be stuff, and that it will admit sometimes, especially nowadays, like you mentioned, the press gets a lot of exposure when it's a negative issue, right? And this could cycle around quite a bit, and it probably will, but just,
Yeah. Like, Visionary Realms is not, some sort of special snowflake that's going to be excluded from all the stuff that goes on with every other company that has ever existed. They will take their shares of, they will experience their share of, issues like this, because they're human and they're made of people, and people are flawed, so it goes. That's how it goes. It's how we respond to that. It's how the community, how do we react to that?
I mean, it's also how they respond to that, which is part of the reason I'm so diehard in this project, is how they've responded to that. But I mean, other stuff like, I doubt they're ever going to shake the, 8 years in development or 10 years or, when the game comes out. Like, I'm sure that's going to always be a narrative of, one aspect of the press. But there's some other things when it comes to like the game, though, that I'm a little afraid of, I'll admit, for content creation, for media getting their hands on it. Like, I'm actually a little bit afraid that there's a lot of folks that might just dismiss the game because it does share some old school designs like tab targeting and downtime. Just because I feel like general media and even like the big MMO content creators, like don't they're not really in the mode of kind of understanding the reason behind that kind of design. And at first impression, it might draw certain conclusions, right? And I'm sure that'll be a thing to some degree, but I will admit those kind of first impressions and takes based on, hey, this is not like what is modern, therefore it is old. I'm thinking we'll probably see some of that, but I hope it's not too much. And
yeah, I think what always strikes me, and I've noticed more lately, is how it's like, it's more of like not really assessing the game as a quality game. It's more like people hear those old school or those, classic sort of mechanics, and they think it won't be successful from a financial perspective, right, or it won't do well financially. They're not really assessing the gameplay or assessing anything like, is it fun? They're just saying, we don't think it's going to work financially. And it's like, what a weird critique, right? Like, what a weird, why do you care whether it's financially successful or not? Like, I mean, I say that with tongue in cheek a little bit because I do want it to be financially successful. But my concern first and foremost is that don't worry about that. Think about, play the game first, decide whether it's fun, then make that kind of assessment.
Yes.
Right?
And when the game is publicly playable, and we start getting a ton of that content coming in, like I expect there's going to be a lot of folks that are going to judge the game kind of based on a few hours of playtime, or actually the one that I'm actually afraid of, I'm saying actually a lot, is people playing the game in an unintended way. Like, you could imagine a MMO journalist or something that, they review every MMO every weekend, right? And they're like, oh, here's this one on my desk, Pantheon. Okay, we jump into it. And they play it like a theme park. They go completely solo and they review the game kind of like that, right? Because that's how every other MMO is right now, more or less. That's pretty extreme, but because that's what they're used to, I feel like that might actually give some negative sway. We'll see how it plays out, but that's definitely something on my mind for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally, 100%. I mean, when Elder Scrolls Online came out in 2014, the PC Gamer did a piece about it that was basically exactly that. They were playing it in a very strange way, and I was like, what is this about? This, just take the game as it comes to you. Like, stop imposing yourself upon it and let the game speak to you.
Yeah. And I guess kind of like lastly on the content creation side, and this is purely from a, I guess, preferential standpoint, but also keep in mind, guys, like I'm definitely biased in this because we are content creators, but one thing that I don't exactly look forward to is getting a ton of like flavor of the month content creators that are going to pick up Pantheon just to kind of, at some point in the development, I bet Pantheon is going to be kind of like the hotness.
I think so too.
Just as like, hey, hot topic, new MMO that's almost done. We're talking in the future. And they're going to try to get those views and not care about the game. And they probably won't have a lot of context and a lot of, they might not even like it, like that type of game. Who knows? But yeah, that also is something on my mind that I'm like, man, that's probably not going to be super great for it might be good for exposure, but it might not be great for like actually painting the game as it is, right?
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, not liking the game is fine. I mean, if you don't like it, you don't like it. That's totally fine. It's just that when there's misinformation embedded in why you don't like it. See, the thing I struggle with too is I don't really like arguing with people online. So like when I see comments, like if I look at a video and there's comments or something like that, I have to really be sort of riled up to respond to it. So I usually let people, think what they want and move on. And I don't challenge people enough online. I don't think, and I think if I'm making the argument I'm making right now, I probably need to hold myself to a higher standard and be more corrective, be like, oh, here's some facts. And Basgrim is so good at this.
Yes.
He does this in so many different platforms. So I give him kudos. And that's one of the reasons I respect him, is that he is not afraid and he's got those facts at hand. So he corrects people. And I really feel like, with this discussion, and I've been thinking about this today, I'm like, what does this mean for me? I mean, I should be challenging people more. I should be trying to bring facts to the conversation more than I do. And it's not because I don't know the facts. It's because I'm just lazy. I just don't feel like getting into it all the time.
I mean, on that note, though, I got to give a huge positive shout out to Baz for organizing the whole Library of Pantheon project. Because in essence, it is making all of these things that we're kind of like labeling as fears as far as information goes, and trying to be like, man, if you don't get your facts straight on Pantheon, like it is so your own dang fault. Because like there are some amazing tools by the community that have been made, specifically the library, but I'm sure more will come, right? And the easier that information is to get, I hope it helps to alleviate, our potential fears here.
Great point. Absolutely great point.
On some other things though that I think I am apprehensive about, and this one might, if people like a bit of rantiness. So one thing that I am foreseeing, I guess, is expectations not being met with Pantheon in kind of two different ways. So like in one way, I think a lot of people are going to expect Pantheon to be a AAA game at release, and everything that kind of goes along with that. I believe they are going to have a really solid game with really in-depth systems, but I wouldn't be surprised if content is a little bit slim. I wouldn't be surprised if fidelity is a little bit lacking, just because this is a game with a few dozen people. And that's just recently, like it's been a lot slimmer in the past too. And I think a lot of people are going to hold it to a certain standard, even people that like the project, and those expectations not quite being met. I do foresee a little bit of that, and we'll see how the community reacts. But
I agree with you. I mean, people need to, it won't be widely known or widely understood maybe that it's not a AAA studio, that it's a small team and all the things you mentioned. So it'll be incumbent on a lot of content creators to mention, this is built by a small team.
Which is why we say it all the time.
Yeah. All right. Exactly.
Yep. And here's the kind of maybe the flagging one here. So this is, let me put it this way. I think Pantheon is going to be a little bit more of a change up from the games that like a lot of the community is super rooted in, and maybe a little bit more than they expect. and I think it might like not end up being the kind of game that's in their heads, if that makes sense. And so I'm a little bit apprehensive of the backlash that's going to come. I mean, we already have seen a little bit of that already from a small portion of the community feeling kind of, betrayed that Pantheon is, adding this thing or changing this thing. And, it's just different than what they expected. And if that's already happening, with the devoted followers a little bit, I think there might be some folks that, hopefully they get all their information straight, right? But I think a lot of folks kind of have this idea of like what a game is in their head that's not always rooted in what the game is, as far as the developers say, as far as et cetera, et cetera. And that's always going to lead to a certain like disconnect. So,
yeah, the thing to keep in mind, honestly, nobody knows. Oh, the only people who know what Pantheon is are the VR devs. Not you, not me, not Basgrim, not anybody. Even the most well-informed person can't tell you what Pantheon is going to be like. And I'm prepared for that because I do, as much as anybody, have expectations and have an idea in my head of what it's going to feel like when we get to play. I'm also aware that I'm going to be prepared to be completely taken aback by something that I'm not expecting.
Or not liking.
Because you just don't know.
You know, like,
Or, well, I mean, maybe I'm sure there will be aspects I don't like, and that's okay.
Yep. Yeah.
That's okay.
Oh, actually,
you know? It's not my perfect
that
game.
makes me think of a few topics that have even come up in our guild. I shouldn't say them on the show, but I think Sparoh might recall a conversation from a long time ago. But anyway, so kind of my last target, I guess, here is, and this is directly at the community, and I hate to kind of bring it down here, I guess, because I don't want to sound too like high and mighty. So feel free to throw stones or whatever. But one thing that I'm actually super concerned about, because I see this way more often than I would like to, is the community not being open to new people that are kind of trying out a new kind of game. And that little bit of like cult mentality, I would call it. And I mean, it's the same with like folks that have been following since the beginning. You know, sometimes we see a little bit of belittling to new followers of the project. Actually, you know what? Let me spin this on the other side too, just so that I'm not sounding like I'm scolding people too much. But I think this also includes white knighting, which, you know, it's the opposite side of the spectrum. We really try to push this idea of being critically optimistic. That's kind of like how I would put it.
I agree.
I would even call it like, actually, let me coin a new term here. How about like macro optimism?
Oh, that's good.
Because there's some nuance to that. You know, in general, we're optimistic, you know, big picture, but we can still be critical of other things. With that nuance, you know, I think a lot of our community, as you can see around the various media, you know, check YouTube comments and stuff, they get pretty defensive whenever Pantheon is criticized, even when it's like a fair criticism. So like, while I would rather we kind of lean towards optimism than doom and gloom, obviously, it's still something I'd kind of like to see a little bit less of, especially when instead of like disputing some negativity, it just like gets kind of flipped into a counterattack. So, because that is, I do see that. I see it, guys.
I think so too. I think we need to hold ourselves to a pretty high standard, in terms of what our conversations sound like and how we talk about this. I mean, God, we've all been parts of communities that things devolve into name calling and nonsense and crap like that. And it just doesn't do anything productive, right? So, you know, like, again, keep it factually centered, not about how you're arguing with somebody. And this is like life lesson for me that I had to learn to be married successfully is don't make it about the argument. Keep it on point, right? Don't make it about it. It could devolve, and especially online, we know how these conversations go when you're not talking to somebody in person. It's the keyboards get involved and everything goes crazy. So, you know, be critical of Pantheon when you have a critique and keep it factual. And, you know, if you disagree, and you can prove it with other facts. Like, again, don't identify, don't get into these camps of, you know, I'm this and you're that. And because then it's just not going to work out.
Absolutely no one. I think my ultimate like utopic dream for the Pantheon community is that, you know, when people come in and criticize Pantheon, the best thing we can do is open the door and say, you know, either try it for yourself or if you don't like it, that's totally fine. Here are some other options, or not to just be like, oh, you don't like this feature? Well, you are like, Pantheon's not your game. Get out of here.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Keeping an open mind to people coming into the community is number one. And, you know, I think we try to exemplify that here when we do the intros from the forums, from the official forums. Like, just seriously, like, you're welcome. You know, like, you're welcome here to have a conversation and be respectful and that kind of stuff. And just try to do that. And people are going to hate even hearing me say that. People don't like being told that. I know that. I'm aware of that. But whatever, it's fine. I can take that. I just don't want to see another community dissolve into you know, chaos.
We're really trying really big on this. But we should probably move on because I mean, I know this probably wasn't the most fun podcast conversation for our listeners, right?
I had fun. I mean, I don't know. I had fun. I don't know about you.
I'm glad we talked about it. I really am glad we talked about it. And I hope folks listening in give some thought as well, give your opinions and stuff. But I do want to say, like, thanks for sticking around. I'm sure I could speak for both of us when I say I really love this community. Like, the Pantheon community is fantastic. And I love what we've got going on, like across the board, from the quiet lurkers to our, big content creators, even, like how a lot of us really try to, like, we work off of each other, we build each other up, in any way that we can. And it's just really stellar. And I would like nothing more than to see everyone grow, even more as Pantheon grows alongside us. Right. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of my, I guess, sappy way of saying thanks for sticking around, and we say onward and upward, right? And I feel like our community in general, like, really does try to uphold that. And I'm really proud of everyone.
Follow that trajectory.
Let's do that.
Yeah, well said. And you do speak for both of us when you say that, so I won't repeat it, but well said. So let's talk about the notes for this week and what's coming up on Pantheon Plus for the week of August 29th through to September 4th. As usual, Monday, we've got Drac and his crew playing EverQuest at midnight Eastern on Twitch. They're doing their EverQuest adventures. Also, CryptFox is playing Resident Evil on his Twitch channel at 7 p.m. Eastern on Monday. And then on Tuesday, it's the MMORPG 101 on Twitch. We're still doing EverQuest. I said that last week too. Elder Scrolls Online. Ever Scrolls Online, yeah. So that's the 101 on Tuesday. And of course, on Thursday is the 201 with you and me does, and Stands in the Fire and Tetsu. And we had some technical issues this Thursday, but I am committed. I am motivated by frustration to make this thing work. I am not giving up. And we are going to continue to do our Thursday nights at 7 o'clock Eastern.
We're going to continue to outshine the 101 crew in every way possible.
Yes. I'm also motivated by that. Yes, absolutely. So I skipped ahead to Thursday. I want to go back to Wednesday. We've got an article going up on Pantheon.plus on our website. This is Wizen's journal number 9. So he's been writing quite a few articles lately, and we did 7, 8, and 9, I think, now. So definitely doing some good writing there. So go check that out. Again, on Thursday, Pantheon Progress is a video done by Redbeard Flynn, our friend, that's going up on his YouTube channel, recapping some progress that's been made in the development
process. I've got to
process.
jump in here a little bit because I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Redbeard's videos are kind of popping off lately.
His channel's growing extensively.
This dude's going places, and I think Pantheon, you got to watch his Pantheon stuff especially. So, shout out.
Yeah. I happened to notice it just the other day. I was looking at his channel, and it's like his videos are getting serious views. So he deserves all the credit because he's just put so much effort into it. So that's on Thursday. And then on Friday, 6:30 p.m., Sparoh is on her Twitch channel playing P99 with her pals there. That's 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. Of course, Saturday night, late night Cringe TV with Nathan Napalm on Cringe Pony TV, doing skits, doing nonsense, getting crazy, late night MMORPG content, which we all enjoy. And that's the week that's coming up. And again, remember, next week is we'll find out if the September 17th pre-alpha test is going ahead. That's going to come from VR. So looking forward to that. But we'll wrap it up there for this week's VR News and Notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
All right. I figure we could probably get at least some community discussion in this week to kind of shake up our main topic.
We need to have a little fun.
So we're going to do something a little bit more lighthearted, and we're going to talk about Quest XP or lack thereof. Ooh. This is from a thread titled Quests Shouldn't Give XP by Feastycentral on Pantheon's official forums. Obviously, you can tell from the title, Feasty is definitely on one side of the fence, but let's get into it for a bit. So to summarize, I guess, Feasty seems to think that quests should generally reward the player with pretty much everything but XP. Gear, crafting materials, faction reputation, consumables, currency, or even hints and lore relating to other quests or neat things like hidden areas and stuff like that. And the thing I wanted to highlight here was where Feasty makes this parallel, because this comes up in the thread quite a bit. The parallels between a quest and an exam. Feasty says, you don't get a burst of knowledge, as in XP, from turning in the exam. You get it from all of the studying and everything leading up to turning it in. Feasty points out that quest XP inevitably leads to what we all know all too well, which is a lot of people just skipping the quest text just to get that sweet XP bonus as a main or supplementary way to progress. As Feasty is kind of requesting, he wants to do quests because they offer something interesting and specific rewards that he's looking for, not just spam through to keep up with others that are also, quest grinding, right? So two ways we could do this, Theric. We could get through some replies and give our takes here, or we could start it off with our first takes. Do you have a preference?
Let's go through some replies, because I want to hear what other people. I feel like sometimes I give my first impressions and I end up saying a lot of the things that other people said anyway.
How about this?
Let's hear from the community
before we get into the replies. Do you think, just without explanation, do you think Quest should give XP? Okay.
No.
I would be in that camp as well. So we'll go from there. And let's see what surprises we can unfold. First one's going to be from Absolute Terror. I'm going to quote a little piece here. It says, currently playing a new mobile game called Eternal Kingdom Battle Peak.
That sounds like a mobile game.
And the quest gives more XP than killing monsters. So, now instead of grinding monsters, I just skip reading, get a huge XP, plus some equipment from the quest. And it even notes, I'll be quitting soon because it always leads to that end. And they also say a good balance would be great if VR can achieve it, but I would rather have a stable XP from monster and maybe random XP and items and gears from quests. Not like a consistent XP all the time, right?
Yeah. Interesting. That's so out of balance in that game.
But I mean, at the same time, I feel like it's fairly prevalent, right? I mean,
it is. It's in game. Yeah, Elder Scrolls Online. Were you going to say that? Because that's what I'm thinking.
But okay. So Disposed List and Feasty go back and forth a lot in this thread, because Disposed List challenges Feasty's analogy. So let's get into that. And there's a lot more to his post than I can throw in here, but we'll go give a little bit. And Disposal says, well, if we gave the student XP for studying, what if the student learned all the wrong stuff or understood it wrong and failed the exam? Do we take the XP away again? The rationale would be that until you know the quest is truly complete and successful, you can't crystallize the game or the gains in experience from what you've learned along the way. Killing monsters and discovering things is easy to count as XP as you go, but quests, not so much. It is upon rest, reflection, and training that you can take what you've experienced and turn it into new ability. At the end of the day, XP is only a measure for when you might be able to make meaningful progress in your character development. But I will note that Disposed List also agrees that quest being a primary source of XP is just not a good trend. So, interesting challenge on that analogy there.
Yeah, it is sort of a real life. It is a real life comparable. I mean, you may study for an exam and you may take the exam, but you may get everything wrong. So you really haven't gained any knowledge through the process of studying. You only gain the knowledge when it's confirmed that it's correct. Yeah,
that's a really interesting way to.
So like the quest turn in is the teacher telling you, yes, you've done this correctly.
It definitely changed the paradigm a bit for sure. Interestingly enough, Dorothea also doesn't agree with Feasty. So they say, unsurprisingly, I do not agree that quests should not give experience. Many of us find the thought of killing 10 million wolves at 3 XP per wolf a terribly boring way to set up a MMO. And they're far happier when we can interact with the denizens of the world and earn rewards for these interactions. I'd rather get to maximum level through quest experience with no experience given for killing anything at all. Let's face it, by the 9 millionth wolf, what are you actually learning? And they also note the example being Dungeons and Dragons Online does it this way. Experiences for completing quests with no experience per kill whatsoever.
That's a great point. 100% true. And at least in terms of my memory of playing DDO, that was one of the things that I definitely noticed.
I can't remember what your opinion was on
interesting.
that, though, because it's been a while since.
Yeah, well, I think when I did my review of it, it was more like, it was sort of obfuscated by other stuff. Like, it wasn't the primary thing that really stood out to me, but I did remember feeling it when we were playing that game, that the questing was so the primary focus, and it's D&D. It should be.
That's
like
true,
questing is D&D is true. Questing, you know. But I feel like this is where the disconnect is between video games and storytelling.
Oh.
You know, like I disagree with Dorothée, what they said there about, you know, you don't learn anything killing the 9 millionth wolf. I feel like you do. I feel like your character is, you know, again, if you're doing a real life comparable, you would be learning with every new time you killed a wolf or an animal or something, or you would learn a little bit something new, you know. And I don't know, so it's not exactly a 1-to-1, but I prefer it so much more than the opposite, and the opposite extreme where everything comes from questing.
Well, Dorothea throws in kind of another thing that might be worth thinking about, and this is towards Feasty, but Dorothea says, your opinion might have been influenced by two things that almost none of us want. We do not want quests to be a very fast way to gain experience, the way it is in many MMOs. We do not want quests to be a golden path leading us from the starter area through the world to the end game. We do not want to go from quest hub to quest hub to quest hub to quest hub. So, interestingly enough, even though they prefer, quests to kind of finalize that, you know, be even a primary source of XP, they don't want it to be a fast way to XP. So there might be some overlap there of what people actually want. And just kind of like, as far as gameplay, it kind of manifests a little bit differently, you know? I think the big question to kind of go with that is, well, if quests are the primary way of XP, how do you slow that down though? So that's a tricky one, but some to think about, because it does seem like in this thread, a lot of people do agree on that fundamental principle, in that they don't want the quest hub experience, right?
Yeah, I think like everybody wants different things at the end of the day, but there is one, we can all agree that maybe there's an imbalance towards too heavily leaning on quest experience being overemphasized in MMOs.
Yep. Well, let's get a nice like centrist view here. So we've got Thunderleg. Thunderleg simply says, I prefer XP from all sources: quests, mobs, perception pings, exploration, crafting, gathering, leveling up, collecting a new technique, completing a named armor set, and so on. Makes for a well-rounded game serving all playstyles and those with limited time. Interesting little tidbit with the completing a named armor set. I don't know if that was, just kind of a random idea, but the idea that you get XP from like all sorts of things, I'm a little bit like neutral on, because I've played games where you get like several sources of XP just from doing regular things. I kind of think of Star Wars Galaxies, or
well, what about your favorite game? What about Vanguard and Diplomacy back in the day?
Yep.
Right.
But Diplomacy gave its own.
The Diplomacy
XP.
gave you, I was going to say it gave its own. And that's what this makes me think of, is that when we think of XP, we're just saying, we're thinking of one bar. Why is there not like separate bars for different areas of expertise? I mean, a lot of games, not a lot, but some games have done that. And I can't think of any offhand, although I know it's been there. I feel like, and when we get to our opinions, I'm going to go down this path a little further, but experience really, to me, is about your combat. It's about fighting and battling with monsters and killing monsters, and that's what it's about to me. And I know people won't like that, but to me, what it's about. It's
super interesting that you brought that up. I'll save my thoughts for the end too, but the Vanguard bring up is, I think, a really, really solid one. So let's get to at least one, maybe two more, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with our takes after hearing all this.
Sure.
So next up, we've got Zonth. And Zonth agrees that beyond the first few levels, quests, and make sure to note that quests as in tasks, because remember, we have tasks and storylines.
That's a good point.
They should not be giving experience. It all comes down to not wanting to be forced into grinding quests, which is exactly what happens. If getting from 25 to 26 is 20% faster by grinding the same handful of kill, whatever amount of whatever quests, then most people are going to do that, rather than explore and try to hold camps or, experience the rest of the game. And Zon says, I would much rather spend my night holding down a bandit camp with a few friends in hopes of getting a rare name to spawn than running back and forth with a murder list I'm checking off for the most efficient experience gain. So obviously Zonth is much more towards the monster XP side, right?
Yeah, it sounds in line with what I'm saying. Yeah, I think he sort of put it pretty close to how I'm thinking about
and I think
this.
it really highlights kind of the idea that tasks, if they do give XP, are basically, as far as we know it, basically the same meaningless fodder that Zonth is talking about, which is you just get the quest alongside this other like tedious stuff just to get an XP bonus, which sounds, it's kind of the commonality of MMOs, but I would say it's rather uninteresting.
Well, it's just a convenience. At that point, it doesn't become interesting or story. There's nothing interesting about a task. I mean, maybe if you're like super into like, drone work, I guess, but like there's nothing, you're not learning anything from a task, and there's really nothing interesting about it. It's just a convenience to get XP. I mean, because it's easier than killing mobs. I don't understand the point of it. I
think the one counterpoint to that, and it's funny because Lord of the Rings Online has been getting a bit of spotlight lately. I am thinking of the oh my gosh, I just forgot the term they use for it. Deeds, I want to say.
Stans
now. Help me out here. But basically, you don't have to go to an NPC to get this certain type of quest, if I remember right. You just go and do stuff, and it adds it up in the UI element. So you might not even know that you're, completing something.
Right.
But then when you go and check, you're like, oh, hey, well, apparently I can, turn this in over here, and it gives you a bonus anyway. Interesting approach. I don't think I've really seen that elsewhere. But I just wanted to kind of bring it up because it might be at least less annoying way to do the tedium, because let's be honest, like the annoying thing isn't the killing, however many mobs at once. Like we're fine with doing that if we wanted to do it anyway. It's that, oh, hey, I'm missing out because I didn't grab this quest and the rest of my group is doing
exactly.
it,
When we were playing Lotro, I made a commitment to myself. I said, I will never kill anything in this game without having a quest to do it, because everything there's a quest to kill everything, right? Like you should never be killing anything in that game without having a task to do, or a deed, or whatever they're called, to do that thing, because you're missing out on experience. And that dilutes it takes away from what questing is.
Yeah, it's just annoying.
It's just kind of like pointless. Like, why not just make the mobs give better experience?
Very true. Very true. I see, for some reason in my head, I was thinking that the acquisition of them was automatic though. Because that does circumvent the annoyance part. Again, like you said, why don't they just give mobs more XP at that point? But at least it kind of makes a little bit more sense, because you would think like, oh, hey, if someone wanted like to cull the population of wolves in the area, and you just show up and you're like, hey, I killed like 20 of them while I was out doing stuff. And they're like, oh, well, cool, thank you. And they give you that little reward. It makes a little bit more sense than like...
It feels more like manipulation of my psyche than anything else. And it feels like checkboxing my psyche a little more.
We've talked
than
enough
else.
about checkboxing, but Well, okay, let's get to this last one. This is from Counterflesh. And Counterflesh says, quests should offer XP only if it's needed to keep them competitive in a time/XP ratio with the other content. Also adding that rewards need to be structured so that questing isn't just farming with a skipped narrative. And I think this is actually pretty prevalent, because a lot of and we even saw this earlier with one of the responses I grabbed, was that sometimes the quests are helpful to folks that have less time. And I would say that if it's helpful to people that have less time, it's just as helpful to people that have more time. So it doesn't really, help assuage that too much. But the idea that if the XP isn't unequal, if, it's nice to get the XP, but you're not feeling wrong if you, missed out on a task or something. I think that's better serving the purpose. But yeah. Now that we kind of got a bunch of responses, has your view changed? Has it expanded now?
No. No, I haven't learned anything. I haven't incorporated any new knowledge. No, I'm just kidding. No, those are all really good points, and I can see the logic in a lot of them. But I think, and I've said this before, but I think Pantheon needs to do things differently, and I think that they are on the right track. At one time, they were very much on the point that storylines are disconnected from any experience gain, and I think that's a good mindset, and it's something I've supported. I also said I thought it needed to be there needed to be some value in being a keeper, some social value. So,
well, just to point out earlier in the thread, I didn't grab this because it's a quote from VR that's already been said, but someone did quote when Joppa was talking about it was tasks, perilous tasks, and storylines, and Joppa made sure to mention that storylines are specific to perception. So
yes,
but the whole advent of tasks, I think, is kind of what we're poking at.
So I think if we take tasks out of the equation, I mean, that's fine. I understand they can't be too different. Like they have to give people this, like all the reasons people brought up here, why tasks are going to exist in Pantheon, and fine. But what I'm talking about is like questing, and I hold questing in a very high standard because it's not just tasks. It's so much more than that. And I don't want it to be attached to some kind of experience progression where people are only doing them because they give experience. They don't care about the story. They don't care about what they're actually doing. They're doing it just so they can, gain some experience or for an achievement of some sort. There has to be, the reward for questing should be the quest itself. And I do want it to be being a keeper. How do you make being a keeper part of that? How do you progress as a keeper if you're not giving experience? This is a tough riddle that I think VR is sort of grappling with a little bit right now. I think Tehom has done some good work. I said his name incorrectly on a video recently. And Tehom, I know, right? So I was very mindful in that moment there, and I was saying his name, say it correctly, and I couldn't remember. Thank you. So I think they're grappling with this issue right now. How do you progress as a keeper if storylines don't give traditional experience? I think that is the right trajectory to be on. So in a perfect world, they come up with the perfect solution, and I'm happy with that because I play ESO, and man, we've gotten some good feedback on our ESO streams because we're actually reading the quests. We're talking to the NPCs. People seem to really enjoy that because they aren't getting that. They're participating in groups that are just running through and blowing through and not talking to any, but still taking the quests because they want that XP, right? Yep. And the reward. You'd be a fool not to.
You're getting people that aren't interested in the quest doing the quest, which is like, why would you force someone that doesn't like that kind of gameplay?
Yeah. So I won't go on too much more, but like I said earlier, there's a conflict between storytelling and video game gameplay that I don't think has really been solved, at least to my standards, in MMOs. So that's my take.
Yeah. I think I agree. Although how I would say it, I think storylines absolutely should give XP for perception, or whatever the skill is called. So kind of like diplomacy is a separate thing in Vanguard.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think storyline should be like a primary way to gain keeper XP in that way. However, tasks are the problematic one to me. And I think I still believe that tasks should not give XP, at least a vast majority of them, because the tedium of having to make sure that you're not it feels like wasting XP. When you're like, man, I'm, tired tonight. I just kind of want to go out and like kill some stuff for a while, get some XP. But then there's this nagging feeling in the back of your head that like, man, if I went, over here to this town and talked to all these NPCs, I could probably pick up some, extra doodling and
I'd be remiss not to, right? Like you feel like you're not playing it properly.
Exactly. And like, if you, this is a kind of slippery slope, I don't want to say if you don't feel like it, the game shouldn't force you to, but in this particular case, I think that's absolutely how it is. Like, I think the forward progression of XP is such a bait for people that they will do things that they don't like just to get XP. And so I think I am a little bit more, as far as tasks, again, separating storylines, but as far as tasks, I'm more with Feasty saying like, dude, give them any other type of reward. Because for whatever reason, I'm okay with passing up a quest that just gives coin and just going out and XPing anyway. Versus the, having XP tied to the quest. So,
You've changed my mind. You've convinced me that is absolutely the right approach. And I wasn't considering tasks, but you're 100%. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me.
The only exception I would say, because it was brought up that there are perilous tasks, and I assume these are things that are actually, I would equate them more to like quests of the typical game. Like, so maybe it is, hey, go out and defeat these, encounters in some way. I would be okay with those giving a small amount of XP, because you're probably not getting a lot of XP from the mobs, like, you're from the named creatures or whatever. Like, so if perilous tasks are actually perilous, that's my kind of exception. But the cannon fodder, no, please. If we have to have cannon fodder quests or tasks, just no XP. I'm still pretty bullish on that. Yeah. But this thread actually is, we're well into page 2. There's a lot of really great back and forth. I really liked a lot of the reason I pulled a lot of these that were kind of like, no, I do think quests, should give XP, is because I think there are a lot of really good arguments on both sides. And this one's really worth discussing. Now that VR has confirmed that they are separating them out between storylines and tasks. So, let's talk about it. The link is, of course, going to be down in the show notes, and add your thoughts. But I think that's going to be it for this week's community discussion. The Pantheon community is full of cool projects, new people, and things that are just worth sharing. What's this over here? Look at that. So let's see what we can find in this week's Community Spotlight. All right. Well, Community Spotlight, I feel like we've expanded this this show a little bit long, but we've got to spotlight our community. And right off the bat, as we mentioned last week, Wizen's been churning out a bunch of entries into their fan fiction series, Weissen, Thalesred, Scrawlings. This one's going to be 8, and that's going to be up on Pantheon Plus. So follow along with their series, and it's like a weekly thing they're like right now. So it's pretty fun. Now the next one, I always am so happy to introduce, RhysInRevelry came out with another high quality video called How Has World Building and Class Design Been Progressing in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen? And it's a recap of the dev stream. But Rhys, I said Rhys again. Rhys has come out with like this really great narrative style, I think, that adds, some information and commentary. So it's not like 100% recap, right? Like a lot of us do, but it kind of picks out certain big points and then gives some thoughts. It's really nice. I love the flow of his stuff, and I look forward to listening and watching his videos every time. He's doing so great.
And I think the audio quality for his recording is really improved too. I noticed his voice is, it's got a great tenor to it. There's a much more of a bass to the recording.
He has a very enjoyable voice, but again, he is kind of British, so like. It
Kind of British.
and let's get to the next one. So this one's from Sparoh. Sparoh did this really short, just kind of breakdown of the Sign of the Black Rose Pledge with all the things that it includes and such, a little informational video. And that's called Get the Deets on, on the new Pantheon Pledge package. So go check ours out or use that video to refer someone if they're thinking about upgrading, you know?
Good point.
Also, we've got our guy Sir Medieval coming out with Visionary Realms Pantheon MMO August 2022 newsletter details, producer's letter, monthly review by Sir Medieval.
It's a lot of words. It's
Hey
a lot
man,
of words.
you got to get everything in the title. Yeah, people got to find your stuff. But this was, you know, it's I'm punching the microphone again. Producer's letter and monthly recap, and again, he's doing a great job covering the game. I think. I like that he dug pretty deep in this one. It was pretty much covered every main detail of both of those things and a few of his thoughts as well. So
yeah, there was a little bit more of his like interests interspersed into this one, which I thought was really cool. I liked how he sort of brought his personal perspective into it.
Yeah, it's really well balanced. I like the balance of this one. Really, it's super solid. One kind of fun thing is he brought up the mob AI, just to spoil this because obviously we're using so much time anyway. So, but it made me happy, and I had to leave a comment, kind of indicating like, hey, maybe you should look into the mob AI because I think it might be a bit more than you're under the impression. Because as you know, a lot of diehard followers know, the mob AI is probably one of the big like features of Pantheon,
big ticket items,
and at least by the description in this video, it was fairly simplified, and so either he was just trying to be quick, or maybe he doesn't know of the feature completely yet. But really excited for him to find that out. And then next up, we've got Tango Hotel doing another Tango Talks Pantheon Rise of the Fallen crafting compendium. Lot of collection of info here.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to watch this one yet. But
yeah, it's, you know, maybe nothing new if you follow the crafting side really deeply, but if you don't, which is probably a lot of people, it's you know, there's just a lot in there. It's worth watching if you've got, I think it's like 20 some minutes or something, because it's fairly comprehensive. So good stuff.
Nice.
Another, this was actually a really nice surprise. I got kind of giddy about this one, and this one is from Tierson Bane, and just kind of another random Pantheon video from Tierson Bane. But this one is the 9 playable races of Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen, and it's a big breakdown of all the races, their class combos, and a short like kind of summary of the race stories and their racial abilities. Yeah. Now, I do want to keep in mind that the racial abilities could change, right? But I love that he just went down the list and paired it all with the lore. Oh.
Yeah. I left a comment on this video because I thought it was a really, really smart way of putting together the lore and the practical information together. And he struggles with something that I struggle with too, and that's some of the pronunciations of some
I
of
love
the
he
stuff.
leans into it.
So he said
the elf one. Yeah.
he did. Yeah, the elf one. That's the one I corrected too. I'm like, I say Seolane, and I think that's how Jan says it, but I should go double check because he was struggling with how to say Seolane, their elf's homeworld. And so I left that in the comments. I thought it was pretty funny, and hopefully you enjoyed that too. But I hear you, man. I feel that.
Yeah, it was super good though. And, you know, if you have an idea of like race and class, you should check out this video because it'll help you kind of connect with your character, I would say, because the backstories for each race is just so cool. I say it all the time. It's amazing. It's like real life myths and legends. It's just great stuff. And they're very well summarized too. The video's not even that long somehow. But yeah, speaking of nice surprises though, this took me for a loop here. And this was a article in the International Business Times by author James Lee. And this is called The Story of the Highly Anticipated MMORPG, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. And it's always kind of fun when we get Pantheon articles on like non-gaming websites or, you know.
Yeah. This one came out of nowhere. And like, it really makes me... it was a good article, but beyond the fact that it was a well-written article, when you get this sort of outside the sphere of normal content creation platforms and outlets, Pantheon getting into other people who would normally never see it, would never know about it, is really important. So I was like, kind of like, just, it makes me feel like the future is here. You know what I mean? Like Pantheon's getting attention from unlikely sources already.
Yep. And I do want to emphasize, it is a well-written article. It's you know, it's got some context about MMO history in general, specifically about Pantheon as well. And even some interview quotes from Chris Rowan. And it was, such a nice surprise. If you haven't read it, definitely check it out. It's cool, man. It's cool. But yeah, that is going to be it for this week's Community Spotlight.
Sit back and relax. It's time for The Lore You Know. Well, it's only appropriate that having just finished the tale of how the Lycandrel and the Night Wolves were created, that we learn a little bit more about them from the history books of Terminus. And for that, we turn to the October 2018 VR newsletter, which contained lots of information about these creatures. As it notes, quote, "These wild creatures have roamed the planet for millennia, beyond us, behind us, among us," end quote. So from the first part of the text, which is titled Modern Day Outcasts, we learn about their place in the world in the present year of 987 IH. This is another piece of lore that hasn't quite made its way to the new website. So listen along as I read the work of VR's amazing writers and this week's Lore You Know.
Today, Lycandrel, Nightwolves, and the subsequent less intelligent werewolf all have similarly poor reputations amongst most people groups. They're hated and hunted, most often due to the vile deeds of the Nightwolves and the animalistic morality of the werewolves. Yet the hardness of Lycandrel hearts toward common mortals has not given fearful outsiders a reason to treat each lineage of lycanthrope as distinct from one another. A wolf is a wolf. This has created a survivalist mindset in all lycanthrope, which suits their reclusive preferences and has kept Lycandrel encounters to a minimum. Yet the peoples of Terminus rarely abide even the most passive of threats. Nightwolves are truly ghastly creatures with no regard for an innocent life. Werewolves, who cannot transform on demand as Lycandrel or Nightwolves, are nonetheless ruthless and impulsive predators. A deplorable secondary effect of the presence of these creatures has been a broader distrust among common mortals and in some cases, bloodthirsty panic. Several cities have fallen prey to unfounded paranoia, and the term Drell cleanses became synonymous with harvest and the early onset of winter. Here, the mania that can attend myth-making is on full display, as Lycandrel are often blamed for everything from poor crops to an early frost. They are often accused of carrying disease and spreading cursed blood, which has some merit perhaps. Yet many innocents have perished from zealous, fearful mortals. There persists a strong belief that burning with fire or drowning a Drell would force the accused to shift into Lycandrel form to escape before death. In these instances, the fate of the falsely accused is worse than that of the guilty. For true Lycandrel, however, there is little concern for the affairs of other mortals. And though it would seem that Lycus's dream was dealt a death blow at Shadir, then utterly buried at the celestial boundary, there is evidence that his wildness yet walks within the living. Some clans of Lycandrel still cling to the ancient calling of the twin-head god, protecting and preserving the ancient wisdoms of Terminus with fervent dedication. This is most readily witnessed in the far northern clan of the Ulfidnari of Frosia Nocta, who have taken up the mantle for centuries. Their culture is based around recovery and study, prizing the solace that the twin-head god once lived for and maximizing their exceptional lifespans. While not aggressive in nature, the Ulfidnari rarely welcome outsiders, and it would not take long to learn the bite of a peaceful Lycandrel is nonetheless more injurious than an evil one. Yet other clans have carved their path by harnessing the physical power of Lycus's blessing, rather than carrying out his personal desires. Chief among them are the Wasche, reputed rivals of the Ogres of Broken Maw, and cunning warriors of stealth and ferocity. An anomaly within the Waschai is their inability to shift away from their lycandral form, or perhaps taking a fervent oath to never do so. In either case, the lack of transformation is remarkable, and as blood-soaked as their conflicts with the ogres have been, any such incident of transformation would have been observed by now. As for night wolves, there are mercifully few evidences of their malevolent kind grouping together for long stretches of time. Most of these native accords are short-lived and mutually destructive, though a handful of night wolves did align with the Revenant for a time. These betrayers were crucial in acquiring military intelligence on the Sacred Six races, understanding their supplies, and so forth. Few night wolves fought in open battle, though one was discovered and killed during the construction of the Burning Sanctum. Most often, night wolves prefer to acquire subservient mortals from other species, either by guile or by force. From this vantage, they were able to pillage and war unchecked, not unlike their delinquent father Noct. Werewolves, however, do prefer to stay in packs, with a social structure that is difficult to maintain due to the irregularity of werewolf transformation. As previously noted, werewolves do not possess the shifting mastery of lycandral or nightwolves, and are therefore unable to construct a stable society. Instead, they rely mostly on the outcast status of their pack members for consistency, as once a werewolf is revealed, they cannot return to their own people. Yet, there are evidences of werewolves submitting themselves to a master and learning how to become a lycandral. However, such a field of study must be reserved for another day. Despite their homogeneous reputation, lycandral of modernity come in many forms. Some are a broken shadow of what Lycus desired for his children, while others have attained a more fulfilled version of that dream. They may be stable and enduring, perhaps even noble, yet most wrestle with an inability to trust outsiders, their own kind, or even themselves. They carry the burden of the wilderness in their soul, but ache from their inability to access Lycus himself. Perhaps this fate will one day be altered, and the burden lifted by the twin gods appearing. Until that day, the might of Lycandral dwells in the hidden places of Terminus, preserving like the echo of Lycus's great howl.
And that is the lore you know. I've really come to associate that sound at the end of the lore you know section does with the end of the show. I don't know if it hits you the same way, that dun 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 dun. It's like the Pavlov.
A little bit, yeah. There's
dogs.
always like kind of this sense of like arrival at the very end.
Yeah, sense of arrival.
Yeah.
That's a nice Pantheon call out there. That's a nice integration of Joppa speak for us to end the show on, so I appreciate that.
It was either that or saying it's obvious that Pantheon Plus is Team Jacob, but that's neither here nor there.
It's amazing that we go long on shows when there's no actual news of the week. Like, we're at a minute and 20, an hour and 20 minutes already, and there was no real
thanks
news
for bearing
this week,
with
so
us,
I think that's
everyone.
kind of funny. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us, for hanging out with us. And I hope the information that we gave you was, the conversation was interesting and informative. And as always, we want feedback. We love your feedback. I'll try to respond to at least everybody, or at least acknowledge the comment when we receive one. So if you like, check it out, leave a comment, or check out some content elsewhere on the channel. We'd always appreciate that if you have the time. But with that, I'll say thanks, Des, my friend. I can't wait to get back here next week, same time, same place for another episode. And until then, cheers, and thanks for listening.
Hi, everyone. Keep an eye on social media.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.